Very good. Hello, everybody. Welcome to ICEN seminar series. Today we have a distinguished speaker, Markku-Juhani Saarinen from Tampere University, Finland. Marco and I, we know each other for almost a decade or more. I know his research area, we follow each other, and he's very active into various cryptographic standardizations. He has an industry background and also academia. So today he is going to talk about a little bit of what's happening with the cryptographic or post-quantum cryptographic standardization things that are happening in Europe. So which is very interesting because at some point the NIST is following whatever is happening there. So post-quantum or modern cryptography, actually algorithms that are standardized today are developed fortunately or unfortunately in Europe, and that's why we would like to hear his insight about that. With that, Marco, I let you start, and if you give a little bit of your bio, that would be great too.
Yeah, I have some slides. Thank you, Reza. So yeah, I worked in the industry, and Reza was my competitor originally. I think we were like, don't talk with Reza, don't tell our secrets. But now we have some joint grants and things coming up, and yeah. But yeah. So, all right. So this is about regulation. So I believe that cryptographic engineers need to know about the regulation almost as much, or even more than, let's say, construction engineers need to know about the building construction codes and such. We just need to build these things in order to be compliant quite often, and that's really the main selling point. If you're selling cryptographic technology, your customers are probably meeting some kind of a compliance requirement. They just basically have to get your product. That's quite often the case. So, all right. So this is not clicking. All right. So yeah, I'm Markku. I've been in cryptography almost 30 years. So I have a business card from '97 from SSH Communication Security where it says that I'm a cryptographer. So I guess that's the date. But that was a startup, so we could write anything on our business card. So that's also the case of CEO was for that. Later, I went back to school. I did a Ph.D. in this thing, so I'm sort of qualified. So being switching between academia and industry, I mentioned that we used to be competitors. So Reza was, of course, one of the first ones to do hardware post-quantum crypto, kind of a pioneer. I was also involved with post-quantum crypto since 2015 or so. We started a company called PQ Shield in Oxford in 2018. I was the first employee there. When I left, we had 60 employees. I hear that they are still doing fine. So after that, I basically moved back. I figured that I want to be a professor, and hopefully they will make me a full professor at some point, or like a real professor. Another thing is that you can ask me about RISC-V. I'm the cryptography SIG chair at RISC-V International, also chairing one of the task groups there. So what we do at RISC-V International is to standardize the instruction set extensions related to cryptography. So for example, I was involved with the basic instructions for AES and the sort of standard stuff that's supported in RISC-V, like in other instruction set architecture. So I'm kind of halfway between the sort of theoretical side of crypto and the sort of very low-end, low-level programming and hardware stuff. So, but the background of this talk is, like I said, one needs to know about the regulation in order to design these things. So one needs to look forward a little bit. So for example, when we started PQ Shield, we knew that the commercial opportunity is coming up because at some point, everyone needs to have post-quantum crypto, and we wanted to have hardware ready for that, and that turns out to be correct. So everyone by law is required to have the sort of hardware that we were building. So having a forward-looking understanding of regulation is really, really important in this business, because that's what the customer typically wants to meet. And that, in addition to algorithms itself, it also relates to the way these things are implemented, like the physical security aspects of post-quantum crypto especially. So this is about the Cyber Resilience Act, which is a Europe-wide law that has come into effect. And that puts in requirements on these implementations. But since this is ongoing thing, everything I say, don't believe me per se. I'm not a lawyer. This is my interpretation of legal text and the related standards. I'm fairly knowledgeable about this particular law because I'm involved with the standardization efforts that are related to it. But still, the final word is, of course, with the European Commission in 1 or 2 years. So very likely to change preliminary information. So please keep this in mind and don't sue me based on what I'm going to say here. But I think it's just useful for especially engineering students and the industry to know about these things before they actually they become effective. So that's really the background. So first of all, introduced to the Cyber Resilience Act itself and how it's being standardized. There's quite a bit of criticism on the way it's being standardized. These are closed standards. The next one is the concrete sort of engineering requirements related to the Cyber Resilience Act. It's a law, so it doesn't give technical information. The technical information are in standards that are associated with the law. And then a little bit about EUCC, which is another law. It's for us engineers, the common criteria is actually one of the strictest security requirements that you can have. The one required in European Union. This is AVAVAN level 5 or 4, and this affects the way we engineer these things. We have to put in countermeasures and engineering components into our implementations because of these regulations. So it's like, think about building codes and fire safety here. So these have a similar legal effect on these products. When they are going to be tested, and you can only sell the products if you meet the requirements set in the law. So so just to explain why this particular law is so impactful. So if you look at my little gaming mouse here, you can see one thing. There's a specific circled thing in there. My raincoat has the same symbol. And also even my toy, this is a moving toy made in Finland, it's a plush toy, but if you look at closely, it has the washing instructions, but it also has this one symbol. Without those symbols, these types of products cannot be sold in Europe. So this means that they are conformant to the European regulation. It's not a made in Europe mark. So these things come from Taiwan and China and God knows where, but it just means that it's conformant. And it's not a quality mark either. It just means that you are conformant with whatever the regulations related to these products are. So this is very wide ranging. So CRA is where the cybersecurity meets the CE mark. This is about electrical engineering. So almost all electrical products in Europe will need a CE mark. So you will find this in your power supply typically. And so forth. The actual requirements are in a set of directives and regulations called harmonized standards. So I will explain what the harmonized standard is in a bit, but that's really the key here. So there's both a product law, a legal text wouldn't say specifics about, like, let's say, fire safety any more than it does about cybersecurity. It has general requirements, but then the interpretation is in these regulations and standards. So the timeline is such that the law itself is in effect, and we are currently writing the standards. They should be published sometime in next year, and by December 27, this is actually in effect. So products placed on market in European Union must meet these requirements in December 27. So there's like about 1 year, which is actually a very short time for the vendors to meet the new requirements. If you're an engineer, if you're doing any kind of product management, like real world selling products in Europe, this is why people learn is the blue guide, which has like all of the safety regulation and autos apply, so you would know like what kind of electrical products you can place on market in Europe. So this I need to emphasize. I think it's on the same. It's not in the slides, but the European common market is 450 million people. It's a substantial market. These are middle-class people. They have a fair amount of money. So the impact of this regulation is worldwide. So it doesn't make sense to have one kind of a product for one market and another for Europe. It's typically when you're designing a computer, you want to make it compliant with all of the major requirements that are out there. And the regulation is such that one country, each one of the 27 member countries in the European Union are able to grant this. So they all have their own, they agreed on this, this is the least common denominator. You place it on market in one country, you place it in Finland, then you can sell it in Spain, you can sell it in Greece, you can sell it even in Norway, which is not a European Union country, but because of our joint market, there's no border, there's like no customs between Norway and neighboring countries. Even they are impacted by this. Even cybersecurity aspects of it. So that's the background. So some words which I had to learn the hard way is what exactly is a harmonized standard. So that means that's a type of standard that if you follow it, like in your electrical safety regulation, for example, if you do meet the requirements set in that standard, then you have a legal presumption of conformity. So you don't need to, in many kinds of products, you don't need to go to a testing lab. If you can demonstrate that, yes, you actually meet these criteria by yourself, then you can put the CE mark on your product. So this presumption of conformity follows from following a standard. In order to have a harmonized standard, you need a standard, and then it needs to be approved in the official journal of the European Union. And that's the way it becomes sort of effectively part of the law itself. European Commission approves the standard to be something that can be used to demonstrate that you are compliant with the law. Now we have two kinds of standards. We have horizontal standards, which are product agnostic. So these would be in cybersecurity, in CRA, things like how do you do vulnerability reporting, which is now required. So every product needs to have like a point of contact. If there's a cybersecurity vulnerability, that will receive your vulnerability report and do something. They have timelines to issue patches and address that vulnerability. That mechanism is in the law. But you can see that this is the same kind of a system that will apply to a fridge as it will apply to many other kinds of products. So that's a horizontal standard. Another example is the supply chain stuff, which is also in the law. So for that, we would have software bill of materials, so one can trace like what is the impact of a specific vulnerability in a let's say a library. Using a software bill of materials, one can find where that library is being used, and that way you can address it in all kinds of IoT products, for example. So these are horizontal standards where this is defined. Now we have a bunch of vertical standards which are very product specific. So these are like super detailed instructions on what does a VPN. There's actually two standards for VPNs because VPN is so vague, or a processor needs to meet in order to have this presumption of conformity. So there's about 40 of these vertical standards. Actually, this particular effort of creating these standards is the biggest standardization effort that we have seen in Europe. This is a massive effort. I will show you some details about it later. So the background on this whole mechanism is that once the European Parliament and the European Commission passes a law, then they requested the related standards. So this is known as a standardization request. It happens in all kinds of industries. For example, automotive safety. There was a law about automotive safety, and then they made a standardization request, and the standardization organization started standardizing. So here we have international standards on top. These are all countries: ISE, International Electrotechnical Commission, International Standardization Organization, and ITU, International Telecommunications Union. So these are international. United States is part of those. On the mid-level, we have Senelec, Sen, and ETSI. So these are the three European, by law, these are the three approved European standardization agencies. And they have the same sort of areas. For example, ETSI is doing telecommunications in Europe and is under ITU. And on the lowest level, I have the Finnish examples because it reaches back down to the national level. So we have a little electrotechnical standardization Finnish national body called CESCO. We have SFS, which takes care of the Finnish side of ISO standards, and then we have Traficom, which is the telecommunications regulator in my country. This is actually relevant because the way these product safety things are enforced is through market surveillance. So every country in Europe actually passes some laws where they denominate that this particular bureau or agency is responsible for making sure that, let's say, fire safety regulations are being monitored. So what they do is actually look at the market and see what kind of products are being sold, and if there's reports of some problems, they can issue fines, they can do product recalls, they take these enforcement actions. So CRA actually comes with the maximum fines are mentioned in the law itself, and yeah, that's many millions of euros. You can lose your right to be in the European market and so forth. So there's a regulation about that. But coming back to the standardization request. So I wanted to study like what's going on in these security standards in particular. I knew that from industry friends, actually, from a colleague in America came to me, an ex-customer in a big American semiconductor company, and asked me, like, what do you know about this CRA? We are worried. Are our microchips going to be impacted by this? So I was like, okay, that's very interesting. I didn't know about this. I'll find out. And the only way to find out is to get appointed into these committees. Now, this is really bad. The way it works is that I had to go through the Finnish national layer. I'm lucky that I'm a Finnish national. So we had this. I could approach these CESCO, SFS, and Traficom at the lowest level, and I had to be appointed by these bodies into this middle layer in order to even see what's going on. So I compared this to what they have in cultural anthropology and some other sciences is this participatory fieldwork, where you have to actually, in order to study some culture in some remote place, you actually have to go there and participate in their things. So I had to participate in the standardization activities just to have access to whatever they are doing. They are very strict about sharing documents and such. This is mostly a closed process. One exception is ETSI. ETSI is more open, so even the current draft standards are actually downloadable for it. Recall that ETSI has, for example, 3GPP under it. So the 5G and 6G standards are technically coming from Europe, even though it's an international effort. But that's one of the reasons why ETSI is a little bit more open. But Senelec and Sen, where some of the standards are being made, is still a closed system. So the way in Europe I had to do that is because the lowest layer, especially on electrotechnical standardization, that's an industry association. You have to be a member of the industry association in order to participate. I had to pay 600 euros, or the university paid, and then they appointed me to one of these bodies. And it was actually relatively straightforward getting appointed because no one even knew about this thing. It was like, okay, no one had ever asked about this particular committee. Yeah, sure, you're the Finnish representative there. And I went to a meeting, and all of a sudden I'm called the Finnish delegate to the standardization committee, and I'm like, okay, that's crazy. I'm now like an official representing my government there. But that's how it happened in a sort of not the smallest kind of European country, but Finland.
Looks like there's a question.
Okay, so there's a question. Close. Close. The next slide actually has a little bit background on the closed standardization process and the risks. I cannot go forward if. Yeah, I think you will have to. My clicker doesn't work unless you activate it. Yeah. So this is about the standardization process. So now we put ETSI outside this scope. We are talking about the CEN and CENELEC. I think many engineers have dealt with ISO standards and ISE standards, and you know that these are not publicly available. So before they are, you don't get to see how they are working unless you are part of the committees before they come out. And then at that point, when they are published, you can purchase the standards from something like $50 to $300 per piece. And even those, after you purchase them, you are not supposed to share them even with the colleagues in your own company. So this is a single seat license. As a result, the standards are not widely known. An academic researcher very rarely pays even $50 to access an article. We don't do that. We hate paywalls, basically, and this is the worst kind of paywall that you can have, because you are not even able to share it with the colleague. Now, so this is why I call it a closed standardization. It's even worse than that. In the CRA standardization process, in a single vertical, like let's say the vertical on FPGAs, where I was the rapporteur, I was not able to share the documents between neighboring verticals. It was that tight. And it was like, I asked people at CENELEC, can I do that? Can we like synchronize our standards? And they said that no, we need to have like a special permission in order to just synchronize the requirements, which to me sounds great. So there's some security risks coming out from having a closed standardization process. So if we compare to IETF, where the internet standards come from, which is completely open, they have there's not even such a thing as an IETF member, because everyone is a member or no one is a member. You can just join a mailing list for free and start like blasting away at the mailing list and participate in IETF. Or compared to ETSI even, which is not, well, they have membership, but their the drafts are publicly available. You just need to have a membership in order to vote, and they take input from public research. But anyway, so there's security risks coming out from that. So one is obvious, you will not get very high quality standards because no one's reviewing it. It's just a basic rule of peer review. And for academics coming into this system, it's of course it's not something you want to do because it's closed and you cannot publish. It's like from our viewpoint, that's the metric we work by. My KPI is by publishing. So it's like, why would I do that? I cannot even do publications, except for like occasional paper criticizing the whole process. That's the only way of getting that. So yeah, low quality. Now, because these are industry bodies, then there's the watering down. So I have, when I was the rapporteur, I had semiconductor companies whose delegates were sent there just to minimize the impact of the standard. They want to just minimize the commercial, like the costs caused by the standard, which means that not having any kind of, that they would just keep selling the same products as they are. So why would they make things harder for themselves just to have some additional cybersecurity? Of course, they don't want that. So basically, this kind of mechanism is poorly suited for a situation where the, let's say, semiconductor companies don't want. I mean, it's bad for them. If it was a voluntary standard, you see, where you just want the people participating in it want to demonstrate that, yeah, we have super good security and we can sell more product if we can get this stamp that shows that we have super good security, then the situation would be completely different. The companies participating in there would want to have this, like have good requirements. But here it's upside down. It's like fighting against the people in the closed committee. So watering down, that's totally happening. They want to minimize the impact of the standard. I need to explain to them again that you cannot make the CRA go away. So because there's multiple checks, European Commission is just not going to accept the resulting standard if they water it down too much. So one needs to find like a compromise here. So that is good enough to meet the legal sort of type requirements, but still sort of not too harmful for the industry. And then there's, of course, the thing that must be mentioned is the risk of backdoors. Especially with random bit generators, we have a very prominent example of the dual EC generator. For example, there's one standard on random bit generation, ISO 18031. It has some strange factoring-based random bit generators until this year. The Michael-Schnorr RPG. It was also from NSA, but it was finally removed just because someone actually wrote a paper. Someone downloaded the standard. They didn't even know that it was in there. Some bunch of academics, Matthew Green and some friends, they actually looked at it and they're like, okay, why is this RSA based thing here? You know, and then they published the paper, and next year it was finally removed. But we have this. And by the way, dual EC is known to be a backdoor because that was in the Snowden revelations back in 2013, and it became quite explicit. They gave some companies substantial amounts of money in order to actually use that backdoor RPG, and everyone knows that in cryptographic engineering, especially, all of the secret keys ultimately come from a random bit generator. So if you compromise that, then you compromise the entire system. There's basically leaking the random bits or the state of the generator online. So we have these kind of risks, you know, that because we are national representatives. So I'm the Finnish representative there. So the American representative, she's the American government. So she's also NSA representing that body. So they can just push stuff like that into the international standards, for example. So these are the main risks I see. I don't think any of these. In cybersecurity regulation, there are not many good sites for closed standards, in my opinion. Now, coming to the CRA itself, so this is super simplified view. Originally for semiconductor only, we have different product categories. There's 4 different categories, kind of related to the risk, and then the requirements associated with these product categories are different. So the easiest thing is the default category. About 90 or 80% of all products are in the default category, and that's the category where you can do self-assessment or so-called internal control. So you can do this thing where you look at you claim that I've done everything according to a harmonized standard. You attest to that. You basically say that legally swear that I've done everything over the standard, and then you can do the CE marking yourself. That's how default category works. Then we have important class 1 and class 2. I'll come to that. In class 1, it's the same thing, but so you can go through a harmonized standard. So typically for these, there are vertical standards available, and you would go through use the specific vertical standard and do vendor assessment. If there's no harmonized standard, then you have to do a thing called notified body assessment. Notified bodies are national, or they are these sort of laboratory type facilities. It's a little bit more lightweight than a full lab testing. The expectation is that they mostly do a document review type thing, and then they, based on the evidence provided by the vendor, you get basically a CE mark. That's called EU type compliance as well. So that's at least that's a little bit more costly because you have to pay a third party to look at your documentation, but it's not so hardcore. Now then we have a class of products which are specifically crypto products, which is, for example, these are critical products, and for them, de facto at the moment you would need common criteria testing. So this is a penetration test. This is pretty serious. There's a lab where people who know what they are doing will try to break your security, and basically they will assign a cost of attack on your thing. So they have good facilities for that. Why I say that this is simplified is that the law itself actually says that it needs to be a European cybersecurity certification scheme. There can be others than common criteria, but common criteria is currently the only one available. So they are working on additional types of schemes. So one is for 5G, for example, like phones and things. So one wouldn't need to go through common criteria, but presently it's like that. Okay, so we have these classes for products, and let's go through the default category. Like, you know, a electrical lamp is a light bulb is an electrical product. It needs a CE mark, but so it's in default category. So you just basically attest that, oh yes, I'm not processing anyone's personal identifiable information. I'm probably okay on cybersecurity. I'm not connected to the internet or something, or if I'm connected to the internet, I don't have any sensitive information. My passwords, if I have passwords, then I'm dealing with the passwords fine, stuff like that. Or if it's a dumb component like a memory chip, then it's similar things. It's like, oh yeah, I'm just a dumb component. So this would be in default category unless the component provides security functions to others. If it's in a PCB, if it's in a place where it's actually providing security for others, even if it's dumb component, or if it's critical in a sense that it can like the says health, security, safety through direct manipulation, then it gets elevated into important or critical category. So that's the way it works. So here internal controls suffice, and then we have a carve out for things that have already existing regulation. So we already had regulations for medical devices. We had cybersecurity regulation for diagnostic devices and auto and marine and aviation. Aviation is already regulated, so you don't need to get a CRA certificate for that. But actually, most of the so all of the consumer electronics almost is in scope here. So these carve-outs are not that big of a market. And that, by the way, includes software now. So I had the electrical engineering examples here, but it's also software. So the law itself has an annex, which is very informative. So it has a list of all kinds of products that are in important class 1, for example. I put a column there which has the upcoming standard numbers as well, the best I know. But you can see that we have browsers, we have operating systems, which is a very, very fascinating draft standard, by the way. We have boot managers, we have PKI, public infrastructure and digital issuance software. So most of these are ETSI standards. So many of these have drafts available, not all of them. But you can see that in the middle, with red, we have some CLC, that's Senelec standards, that's electrotechnical standards. For example, mine is the ASICs and FPGAs. So this is the vertical standard for basically semiconductors. There's microprocessors and such. So that's the part where I was involved in. But then there's important class 2. So that's like a little bit more sensitive software and hardware. We have firewalls, we have intrusion detection, we have hypervisors, that sort of thing, and also like more high security microchips. And then we have the critical products, which is smart cards, secure elements, hardware devices with security boxes. So that's like payment terminal, like the one you would have in a shop. That would be a hardware device with security box. And yeah, so the testing requirements go up with those. And then we have the horizontal standards. I already mentioned that there's these standards specifying SBOM, vulnerability handling, generic security requirements. The way you design things, these are kind of vague, and some of them are process oriented. So you are just certifying that your company has mechanisms in place in order to handle, like, let's say, vulnerabilities and such, that you have appointed people. So, and on top of that, those to make up the numbers, then everything's repeated, because you can have multiple harmonized standards to meet a specific requirement. So they in industrial automation, they said that we already have standards for these things. So can we just use the standards we have? And sure, yeah. So they are creating these sort of thin layer standards that just apply whatever processes that they were using for this thing. All right, so that's the situation. Now let's go to America. Like
Looks like there's
this question.
What is software bill of materials and how do they handle it?
So it's also mostly required in America. It basically tells where does a software component come from, who made it, and how to like contact them, how to report vulnerabilities. This is standard file formats, I believe, for them. Like it's about supply chain security, so that if a final product, like a software product that has vulnerabilities, from cybersecurity viewpoint, we can trace like okay, the other way around. If a software component has a vulnerability, we can trace all of the software that uses that component, and that way we can address it across the board rather than fixing it in a single, like let's say this breach has a security problem, but we know that the actual bug is in its crypto stack, so we can find the crypto stack and then fix that everywhere, and that's in my view the main point where we are using it. But it's there's also a crypto bill of materials, which is something that's used for crypto inventories and PQC transition. But this is software bill of materials is like a pretty standard thing nowadays in software engineering. So they have in US here we have a somewhat similar thing started a couple of years ago called your Cyber Trust Mark. It's more limited in scope. It's only IoT products. It's IoT products connected to the internet. It's from FCC. Is it active? Excuse me. Is this active?
Yes.
All right. I'm gonna proceed. Okay. But the thing is that it's a little bit funny. So it was inspired by this Energy Star from Environment Protection Agency. So they consider this to be a great success. That everyone wants an Energy Star mark.
Okay, he just said thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's voluntary. So they modeled the program for that. So Energy Star is, of course, you're familiar with that logo. You'll find it in your fridge or your insulation or whatever, and so forth. So it's just a model for the thing. Currently, they are not doing it like in Europe. What they did is kind of outsource the whole development of the standard to UL Solutions, US-based testing lab. Originally, is more than 100 years old. They originally did fire safety for insurance inspectors in Chicago, I believe. They appointed this company as lead administrator, and they were doing industry consultations and coming up with the certification process for that. Now, recently this summer, the new FCC head, I believe, with this administration, came out and said that UL Solutions has China connections, and now it's been kind of on hold, this whole process. It's not very surprising that a company that does products security for IoT products would have China connections, because all of those products are made in China almost. So of course they test them in China, and the UL Solutions, even though it's American based, had laboratories in Shanghai and so forth. So well, it might be a problem, but anyway, this is in a hold. So to recap, this is voluntary, and it's currently kind of frozen. And anyway, it doesn't have this legal requirement as in Europe. We have with CRA. There's only like industry associations, like when you sell a product to finance, for example, they will require certain things about cybersecurity, and some other organization. Now, of course, then there's the government itself. This federal government has NIST requirements, and then on the defense, and then we would have like NIAP, National Information Assurance Program requirements. I have a side note there that these requirements are not super hard technically to meet, but yeah, so side channel security, for example, not required. Now, one thing we do when we write these standards is we have to go through the law itself one line at a time. So I've been in meetings where we just try to interpret technically these legal things, especially the Annex 1 Essential Cyber Requirements has line by line things like, oh yeah, you need to have secure updates. And then, okay, so we have to interpret what is a secure and what's an update and what kind of products it applies to, and then try to come up with technical requirements related to that. So the law is publicly available. Yeah, good.
When you're doing that,
yeah,
is that like company or business specific, or are there certain protocols that you can follow that define those words?
Yeah. So we are writing the standard. So this is under Senelec. It's a committee. Members need to be appointed by basically your home country, your own standardization agencies. I'm representing Finland in the meeting. But many representatives, they are like let's say the German people in there, they are actually from the German industry. So they would be like, oh, I'm from Siemens, or I'm I'm Intel. I was very lucky with FPGA. For example, I had people from AMD Xilinx, which is the biggest market share. Then there was Intel Altera, and then there was Microchip, and these together are like 90% of the makers of these types of devices. So that's it's good to get industry feedback, but that's the situation. But they were appointed by their own committees into that. Yeah. Now, so going through briefly about the actual Annex 1, there's a catch-all first in part all, shall be designed securely. So this is in horizontal standard. That's too vague for vertical standards. And then there's part 1.2, which is the specific list of shall requirements. It has 13 essential requirements. This is our Bible. This is what we talk about all the time. From A to M, 13 essential requirements, all required by law. And of course, with the caveat that they are only required if risk assessment says so. So not all products will have all secure updates. If you don't even have software on your product, you don't have secure update. Risk assessment is tricky. There's some processes being made for that. One thing that impacts risk assessment is the intended use. So products should always come up with some statement what they are supposed to be used for. So for electrotechnical products, that's kind of straightforward. For example, for a transformer says that, oh yeah, you don't plug this into 1,000 volts power supply, it doesn't work. It's like you need to tell people how you are using a fuse or whatever. So it's a similar thing. For software, it's a little bit different, but use case is still there. So the traditional risk assessment is insurance mathematics. It's a probability times loss, and you sum up those, then you come up with a risk. But here, especially with components like processors, we need to be a little bit express it in a different way. So we might say that, for example, this cryptographic feature cannot be used for personally identifiable information. You cannot use it for sensitive stuff. State that clearly. If you're not using it for that sort of purpose, then you can use different kind of technology. So it's about use case more or less. A to D, security defaults. Just going give you a taste about the non-cryptographic requirements. No exploitable vulnerabilities on market. Security default configuration. Need an update mechanism. Need access control. It has specific requirements about passwords. No default passwords. And so forth. So these are the first 4 of the 13. Then we have the specific things about cryptography in here. So confidentiality. To a cryptographer like me, confidentiality means encryption. This is the actual, is this short? So this is where Annex 1 states about it. You need to protect stored, transmitted, or otherwise protected data. So stored means that's like a full hard drive encryption typically. Transmitted means TLS or similar mechanism. And then there's the scope, personal or other. The other is difficult to interpret. And then it gives a suggestion that, oh yeah, you can do this by encryption, but perhaps by some other mean. Now, then there's another tricky word, which is state of the art. Is that like the research state of the art, or is it like the practically usable state of the art? This has been debated. So this is like the main cryptographic requirement. And then there's the other one, which is about data integrity. So this one says that everything needs to be integrity protected. To a cryptographer, integrity protection means digital signatures, message authentication codes, and hash functions. You can see that the scope for integrity is wider. It has commands, it has programs. So technically, in order to run a program, perhaps you should check a signature, the operating system should check a signature before that, to prevent malware and such. So this is now in law. But that's all. So that's the only thing the law says. It's written in a way that it can be valid for decades, even though it's relatively technical. But the question about like what kind of crypto can be used. I think this might be actually the last thing I cover. Is a bad example of what the current harmonized standard does. We don't have the current standards out yet. So there's a related standard that came out last year. This is for the radio equipment directive, so-called RED. So it's a cybersecurity standard that applies to wireless products that are connected to the internet. And it had this kind of guidance about what is best practice crypto. This is a tricky one. So they first, I'm looking at this from the perspective of being a vendor, and I'm an engineer being tasked that, oh yeah, I need to meet these requirements in order for us to be able to sell our product in the market. RED was also had the CE mark, or well, almost it was required basically to sell stuff in Europe. So first, it gives you some good guidance. Oh yeah, there's like this SP800, the NIST standards. They are probably like a good guidance and such. But then it has like this thing in the middle that I can interpret as a pretty dangerous definition. A commonly used cryptographic method for a certain use case with the lack of evidence for a feasible attack with currently readily available techniques can be used as best practice. Now I'm tasting this definition or phrasing a little bit, and to me it sounds like that, oh yeah, if it's something that everyone's already using and it's not being exploited, then it's probably good enough. It's not best practice, but it says that it's best practice, so it's good enough. This is very, very low bar, actually. Yeah, good.
How would you go about addressing things within cryptography, like we talked about like quantum and post-quantum cryptography, saying that's like
this doesn't, yeah,
there yet, but
yeah, so that's one thing. Here it says currently readily available techniques. So of course quantum computers are not readily available. No one has them yet. So this is a very, very big definition because it doesn't do that.
And what do you all define as readily available? Does it have to be a certain number of companies or people?
Yeah, it basically means that someone is exploiting it in the wild. So that would be my reading. So this is ridiculously bad. So in cybersecurity, we want to be forward-looking. We have to be already ready when the people are starting exploiting things. Right? This text is not doing that. So that's why it's like this. So you know, it's any crypto is best practice crypto right until the house is on fire. So that's my reading of this text. So they all have this particular thing here. Currently readily available techniques. Evidence of feasible attack. That means that you are already being broken into. So that's the evidence of feasible attack. Then only after that the best practice changes. That's ridiculous. That's just too bad. This was this no foresight approach was apparently a compromise and an example of this sort of watering down effect of standards writing, where none of the corporations participating in the standard work wanted to modify their products anyway, so that they could you know, sell their old stock, you know, their old whatever products they have in store, so forth. So to recall that in cryptography specifically, we typically have ample warning of weaknesses. You usually know quite a long time in advance. They are not like 0 days. So as an example, like MD5, here's an article from 1996. So this is written by Hans Dobertin, late cryptographer at BSI, the German Information Security Agency. He found a pretty serious weakness in the MD5 function, and after that point, in 1996, they said that don't use MD5. But people kept using it, even as like in 2010. Yeah, it's around still in today. 2010, there's a malware called Flame, for example, that spread because Microsoft had used MD5 in their software signing certificates. So the malware vendors were able to forge an MD5 or a signature based on MD5 attack, and you know, then Microsoft products would just check the signature and would run the piece of malware. Yeah, XP. Okay, so that was in play. So that was 14 years after that, and the actual readily exploitable. Okay, that was sharp. Okay, MD5 was around 2004 when it was like actually being exploited. But it was even after that they kept using Microsoft, who should know better.
Is this exploit would push the industry to start using SHA?
Yeah, that was one of the things. So the actual attack, when MD5 was broken in 2004 by Wang, also broke sort of SHA-1. But that was exploited only in 2017. Google and friends actually did that. But SHA-1 was also broken by the same attack. Another example is that this is precisely what you mentioned. I went to archive.org. I dug up a web page from 10 years ago. You can see that this is that September 2015. So this is what the NSA then said that, oh yeah, we are transitioning to post-quantum crypto. We started it. I frequently still meet people who are like, oh, this post-quantum stuff is new, but we've known for 10 years that this is going to happen. And actually, it's been very impressive. They've completely followed through. They've done exactly what they said 10 years ago that they would do. And of course, if NSA, they did their risk analysis and they thought that, yes, this is probably a sensible thing to do. You know? And also in their motivation, they said that we know that transitioning to new kinds of crypto takes a long while. So that's why they wanted to get started. So these are not 0 days. You don't wait until exploitation. Now, I think I'll leave the last section out. I'll go through the last requirements here of the 13 very briefly. So these are sensible requirements, but they also lack technical definition. Only sort of minimize your footprint, minimize the sensitive data. If you don't need it, don't store it, so forth. Protect available, so that means kind of denial of service attacks. So you don't lock up your system like easily. Minimize the negative impact by products on other systems, so your component is not being harmful in the network. Limit attack surfaces and so forth. Isolation mechanisms. And then there's more technical things that I'm not sure how to even interpret. Design and develop to reduce the impact of incident using exploit mitigation mechanism, and what even is an exploit mitigation. Isolation would be exploit mitigation. Isolation means that your processes don't like easily read out their other processes info and so on. Then we have logging, serialization, and secure backups. These are the final essential cyber security requirements. Now, I won't be going into the Amsterdam proposal. That's actually might be a good thing. I might get into trouble if I talk about that. So, any questions? I suppose.
Anyone on Zoom, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask your questions if you have any.
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah.
You can go on.
Raise hands. That's a better idea. Okay, I'll go first. So thank you. This was very, very informative. Could you talk a little bit about how you actually go about from a software engineering perspective when you're looking at some of this? I know a lot of this is policy and procedures.
Yeah.
But if you're literally a software engineer trying to deal with these things, do you have a workflow that people start as a framework? How would you even go about implementing some of these requirements?
So the way compliance work usually does is you take the standard or the requirements. Typically, we search for all shall statements, of course, and the must statements, the requirements that you need to meet. Then one does like creates a little checklist, like, oh yeah, these are all of the requirements we need to address, and then tracks I mean, this is pretty obvious. You just track, how you are addressing each one of these requirements in the standard. The one distills the standard into a set of basically checklists, and that's the process. And that's how our project manager would do it. And also try to extract the technical requirements, like we need definitely a support for MLDSA, the post-quantum crypto standard, by this day. And that becomes a project management question. So then, from software engineering, you need to find a library that implements that in a correct way, and insert that into your product. And yeah, that's pretty much the engineering process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess it's my turn. So thank you very much. I echo Mahesh's comment that this was very interesting. Maybe just a little bit of a suggestion. First of all, I commend your investment into the standards and certification um, processes, right? The only way that will ever change, improve, or evolve is if people get involved. So it's very good to hear that there is that kind of participation. And from my point of view, I've got a lot of experience with ISO IEC, but the Sentinelec was a little bit light. And so it's very interesting to hear some of that perspective as well. And from the point of view of the cryptography, which is really interesting. Just maybe a comment, and not necessarily a question, but the other systems of these international standards are designed to be more of a pull than a push, right? So unlike, I think the expectation with crypto, because it moves so fast compared to other industries, is that maybe this can help drive the the bar, right? Where I think in a lot of these other systems and the way this is all set up and modeled is that it's more of a kind of a way to capture all of these guidances and guidelines that markets can use, right? But the fundamental principle is the reciprocity across markets, and so it does tend to be sort of the lower bar in these specifications and standards because you can't. It's difficult in the markets to get participation, and reciprocity, and consensus, and transparency, and all that. But you're driving, demands that are may not be able to be met by all the members. So
yeah, that's right. So this is being used as an enforcement mechanism, which is unusual for standards in general. So in the industry, the companies would be happy to agree on, like, let's have this kind of plug here, for example, or these kind of balls in there, so their products work with each other and everyone wins. But here, because it's used for enforcement, they are very, very reluctant, of course, to accept that. So yeah, it is unusual, but that's the way European law works. But it has been used before. On the other hand, like in automotive safety, ultimately, perhaps the companies would like to have seatbelts and things. That's also another kind of standard. But probably that was initially a hard sell as well.
Yeah, I think it goes both ways a little bit, where it helps the companies to adopt it as well once it becomes commonplace.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a set of companies that is, I mean, to me, it's obvious. Like, I know that, okay, this company, they have good security. They have everything to win. They want to raise the bar so that others would be left out of the market. They would win. They would get a bigger market share because they already meet the requirements. And then there's others that, for one reason or another, they don't want to do any engineering, update their products. So.
Yeah, but some have, like you said, some have that competitive value where they can be differentiators, and that's where they get their little marketplace.
European semiconductor industry is funnily structured in a way that we have a lot of players that do specifically high-end crypto, like smart cards and things. We have NXP, ST Micro, ST Micro, Infineon. Each one of these is at least $10 billion company. Those are not made in America. So my understanding is that, for example, the smart cards here are largely European made. And from a semiconductor viewpoint, this click actually is driving that particular standard to have a very high security in order to remove competition. They almost had a little trust going on there. The European Commission had to go in and help with that to lower the bar.
Do you want to talk also a little bit of European standardization, how it differs from US EQC for that?
Yeah, so that was kind of in the slide, but yeah, so these are closed processes. So especially the NIST post-quantum crypto competition had been very positively received globally. So even though and like Reza mentioned, the standards themselves, those standardization teams actually were largely European, but actually some of the hardware was done in America. So let's say Lattice Crypto, Regev, who kind of sold the whole concept to the theoretical computer science, is American, and Pikert and friends. So, but somehow what US was lacking in crypto was this, just like doing the actual engineering side, let's say the design side of the aspect. But yeah, the NIST process, NIST ultimately makes the decisions ultimately because these are federal information processing standards, but still it's global participation and completely open. Yeah, so very, very different. Then there's other kinds of, then there's ANSI standards. So for example, there's crypto standards from the finance in ANSI. That's close on the other hand. But they tend to do in banking is take existing stuff and use that. And it's invisible. For example, they have their own PKI in finance. They had a root signing ceremony for post-quantum crypto. So there's actually they transitioned, like one of the earliest transitioning places was the American finance in the post-quantum crypto.
Do you think AI is a threat for the standardization?
I don't know how it's exactly a threat, but what I can say is that when you are doing this stuff, you have large masses of text that you need to somehow grasp. And AI is a great tool for finding. You have to check, of course, what it's telling you. But if you want to, like, where on earth does it talk about this particular thing? You know, ChatGPT, I think it passed like bar exam up here, so it's like it's perfect tool for that. So, but yeah, I wouldn't trust the things, but for just like managing this mass amount of textual information, a large language model is great.
Quick question. Have you had any experience with medical products, especially with the European Union? Because I know that the European Union tends to be like one of the most restrictive frameworks in comparison with others.
Not directly, but so medical products and diagnostic devices are a carve out from CRA. But many of the people who work in the standards come actually from that, because that happened beforehand. So the rapporteur for this 18031, for example, works for Philips, and Philips is a major vendor for medical technology specifically. And this effect happened is that they drove up the requirements in order to have their own market export. I've seen the process diagrams as well. It's incredibly complicated. Yeah, it's really a compliance nightmare unless you are there able to like run around Europe and getting stamps and yeah.
Yes. The reason why I'm asking is because I have had the opportunity to work with that. So maybe you could give us an insight of which particularities you could recommend from that.
I just know that it's a separate piece of standard, so it's outside the scope of CRA. But the processes are complex. But it's ultimately enforced in a similar fashion. There's a bunch of laws about product safety, also about food and things, and food standards are then translated in food law regulations are translated into standards, and you can purchase those. But of course, then that you don't learn much. You need to have this practical experience of actually working with some company that tries to be compliant with this, and then one sort of grasp what are the actual requirements. Usually the shortcut in order to get into having a compliant product is just hiring someone who's already gone through the process and knows what the right how to address that. That's really so. That's why I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert on medical stuff, and I know that in Europe they have really extensive requirements on that. Could be in America too, but that one I know even less about.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, we are already a little over time. So
Okay.
Yeah, there's still a question.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask, I was a little curious about like the details when it comes to the standardization process, especially for cryptography. So I know like a lot of probably like companies that don't want to go through the effort of implementing their own, cryptographic protocols, or even just the whole, if they do the TLS stack, they're going to use something like Wolf SSL or OpenSSL, or they might use something more simpler like the GNU Privacy Guard or something like that. I was curious about where the standardizations come in when using those kind of, either third party or open source or free software implementations, when using that, is like, does the standardization ever have any, like, do they look into what you use, or are they curious, or is it just more like you say, okay, I use this cryptography algorithm from this library in my design, and then it's just kind of like we're good, or is there more into it and they look and they say, well, we don't really trust this design, or you can't just use anything, you got to use like maybe from something that we know is good or is popular or something like that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. So there's multiple levels to this. So in America, in the consumer market, there's no requirements basically. But if you want to sell to the federal government, then your crypto needs to be FIPS certified, Federal Information Processing Standards 140, and then they do this sort of a composite evaluation. If you use a standard library like OpenSSL or WolfSSL, they already have this sort of a certification type thing, and it's a fairly lightweight process. One gets a quote from one of the approved testing laboratories. It's like, oh yeah, we have a product, it's using OpenSSL, and we want to get FIPS certified so we can sell to the federal government, or we can sell to others that just like to have products that have FIPS certification. Then they give you a quote. It can be $10,000, $20,000, fairly lightweight process, relatively speaking, and you get that. If you build it from scratch, there's a steep learning curve in order to get a FIPS certification. So you're going to end up paying a lot more because it's several man years. So that means hundreds of thousands of dollars automatically. And in Europe, yeah, it depends on self-certification. We are in self-certification, we are basically doing functional testing only. So that's something a company can do themselves, is to check that your test vectors match your crypto algorithm is the algorithm that you state. If it's a little bit more high security, then it goes into common criteria type or third-party laboratory testing, which can be really serious. They will do a penetration test and quite often know what they're doing, so they will actively try to break the security, and they will assign a score. It's very, very difficult to meet AVA1 from engineering viewpoint. It's just the task of engineering something to meet the highest security levels is difficult because of the side channel stuff and so forth.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it depends. Yeah.
We talked about ChatGPT. Do you personally believe in standardization or regulations on ChatGPT? Because recently we are hearing some news about data leakage and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you personally, like person who has profession in this area?
So I mean, yeah, I think most security policies would prevent any kind of sensitive information being fed into like a shared large language model that is externally hosted. Yeah, that's why one would have private thing. We in Europe we have a AI law coming up, and it was done exactly the same way. There was first a law, and then there was a standardization request. Currently, the standards are late. It has led to heavy criticism, especially of Sen and Senelec. I can totally imagine what has happened. They did not find experts to write those standards, and that's why it's delayed. The law itself is fascinating. It has like specifically dangerous AI, and it has a definition of, I think it was like that the training was 10 to 25 floating point operations used for that. That's 2 to like 83 floating point operations. ChatGPT 5 you mentioned is that sort of magnitude was used to train it, so it's considered especially dangerous. I guess they are like afraid of this thing just taking over or something, But that's already in the European law, and it's funny that in legal text that it has like such a specific definition for that. But yeah, so the standards are late. I don't know the impact of that, but of course, when you are doing IT security, then you would put policies in place that you just don't put sensitive information. Yeah, legal text is open, so of course do that.
All set. Very good. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining and for the great questions.